We're talking about time travel books today. I hope you like the past because BAM! It's coming at you. Let's talk about it. Okay, guys, I started putting up my Halloween stuff because the boys are back at school, which means that I have hit my time limit for when I can start putting up Halloween stuff. So I've got my little magic thing here, and you can't really see this, but up on my upper shelf, I have this little eek sign. I have to show you how cute that is. Eek! Oh, it's adorable. Oh my gosh. Anyway, so this gets to sit up on my desk or on my bookshelf up here and make me happy because that's the way that it goes. Okay, so today we are talking about time travel books. And if you love time travel books and you like kind of science fiction-y fantasy style things, please like and subscribe to this channel because that is pretty much all that we talk about. Not time travel, but fantasy-ish things. So today we are talking about time travel books that I would recommend to you. 2 of them are YA and one of them is adult. I bet you that you know at least one of them, and the other ones you probably don't. So let's jump into it. First book that I am going to suggest to you guys today is one that I have read multiple times as a young adult, and that is the book Waterfall. It is the River in Time series by Lisa T. Bergren. So the things that I love about this book, spoiler free first. Lisa T. Bergren does a really, really good job of creating realism in her time travel. So I'm not talking about going through the stones or like the way that the main characters go back in time, but she is a amateur historian of sorts. She absolutely loves history, and so she does a lot of research into her time travel series before she started writing the books. Now it happens in 14th century Florence, Italy. I believe that's where it is. They're made up names of families, but like the actual places, it happens close to Sicily. But it's during the 14th century, so it's the 1300s. And these 2 girls, teenagers, 17 and 16, go back in time. And the craziness that ensues when they show up is like seriously intense. At first you're thinking, okay, how is she going to get through this? And then it feels like there's like a resolution at like 30% of the way through the book. And you're like, how is this happening? But let me tell you, there are twists and there are turns through the entire story that keep you on tenterhooks that make it really, really interesting. This isn't giving away very much because it happens in the first couple of chapters, but when they go back, they get separated. So a major part of the story is the older sister looking for the younger sister as they go back in time. So I'm going to read the back synopsis for you, and then I will give you a little spoiler-y-ish review so you have an idea of what is in the book if you would like to read it and not get surprised by anything. All right. What do you do when your knight in shining armor lives literally in a different world? Most American teenagers want to vacation in Italy, but the Bartolini sisters, Bartolini sisters, Betterini, oh my gosh, I can't speak. The Betterini sisters has spent every summer of their lives among the romantic hills with their archaeologist parents, stuck among the rubble of medieval castles in rural Tuscany on yet another hot, dusty archaeological site. Gabby and Leah are bored out of their minds until Gabby places her hand atop a handprint in an ancient tomb and finds herself in 14th century Italy. And worse yet, in the middle of a fierce battle between knights of 2 opposing forces. Suddenly, Gabby's summer in Italy is much, much more interesting. Okay, so this book series, there's a whole series of these. I think there's 4 in this story with these 2 sisters, and then there's branch off stories and stuff. The author is still writing these. This was, I think, published in 2015. 2015? This was published in 2011. So there you go. 2011. But the author is still writing books. She actually has a couple that have either come out or are coming out this year in the same River of Time series. It's really, really good. I think you guys would really, really like it. Now, in terms of kind of a spoilery-ish warning on it, there is quite a lot of blood. This is happening in 1300s, 14th century Italy, and it was brutal back then, guys. There was not the idea of human rights and stuff like that were not a thing. And so there is a true war-esque style to what's going on. And there is some pretty brutal and bloody things that happen. So there is that. There's some things that would be, I don't want to give up too much. There are some punishments that are done to some prisoners that are reminiscent of La Tempest. So just in that regard, just know that it gets a little intense sometimes. So there is that. Also for Spice Meter, this is definitely a YA novel. There is very little spice. Lots of tension, lots of longing looks, lots of obvious attraction. But there is pretty much no spice. There are a few kisses, but you can rest assured if you are not wanting to get a spicy book, this is not a spicy book. It is very much YA, and it was written appropriately in that regard for young adults. So that is Waterfall. The thing that I loved about Waterfall that really pulled me in was the characters and the focus of the characters in the story. A lot of fall back in time stories, I feel like, just get caught up with the romance of it all, of like this idea and romanticizing what's going on at that time period. But in this one, it's very much like this is really what life was like. And the main character does not give up on her quest to find her sister. Everything she is doing has a purpose. The writing style is also very easy to read while not being unintelligent, if you understand what that means. There was recently somebody on one of my videos that was talking about how, the book, I think it was on the Reckless review, they said, well, it's young adult and it doesn't need to be like high purple prose or whatever to be a good book. It's just young adult. And so you should just deal with it. And I understood what the person was saying, but I also deeply disagreed in the idea that young adult novels should be written well. They should still feel like well-written books, not books that are, halving it because it's young adult and they think young adults are stupid. Growing up, I feel like the young adult genre didn't get as much attention from popular mainstream media. I am 37, so my youth was spent reading and scouring young adult novels, and they were written well. I almost feel like you had to have a higher level of writing to write in young adult because the publishers were so convinced that young adult was not a good genre to write for and that people were not going to be interested in it. So anything that was published in young adult was really quite good. So that's something that I really love about Waterfall, is that it was really well written. It was very well researched. The families are not real, but the conflict that was happening at that time in Italy, in Tuscany, was very real. So that aspect of it is pretty great for like learning things and being immersed in the world, and the fact that the girls felt real. Things felt real. There were real stakes. There was real stuff going on. The consequences of their actions were real. And sometimes they messed up with their 21st century ideologies when applying them in 14th century Tuscany. So I really, really enjoyed that. I thought it was a very good aspect, very well written for a young adult novel. So that is Waterfall by Lisa T. Bergren. I always have to look at the screen when I'm reading this because I feel like I'm going to say her name wrong every time. I don't physically own the book for this one, but I own the second and the third books because I found them on sale, and I was so excited. And I bought the second and third one, and I have been scouring for the first one since then. For those of you that don't know, I don't just go to the store and I buy books like at Barnes & Noble or at Eborn Books or Amazon or whatever. I like to find my books through the natural distribution of thrift stores and secondhand bookstores. So I always am on the prowl for specific books, and this is one. It's called Ruby Red, and it is by Kerstin Gier, Gier. So here's the second book. This is the second book. This is Sapphire Blue. But the first book is called Ruby Red. So the trilogy is called the Ruby Red Trilogy, and it is also a back in time travel story. However, this one's very different. This isn't a situation of somebody finding something and going back in time because they touched this magical orb or whatever. This is a family trait that runs in specific family lines where they are able to go back in time. And the story is crafted around a young woman who has grown up her entire life thinking that her cousin was the one who had the ability, not her. So she grew up kind of with this snobby cousin, and it's very old school, like old money England kind of lifestyle that's very formal, but she had this cousin who just was always so much better than her. So we explore that relationship in the first couple of chapters of the book, but then come to find out it is not the cousin that is the one who goes back in time, is able to go back in time. It is her. She can go back in time, and it totally flips the entire family dynamic. The society that they work with that does the whole time travel thing with them, that kind of controls the time travel, which you always know that a governmental body that controls other people is not a good thing. So they end up kind of becoming the bad guy. But I digress. The story is centered around this girl who is able to go back in time, and she is trying to catch up on a decade plus worth of education and knowledge that her cousin got for preparation to going back in time and being almost like an agent, provocateur of some sort. The story really gets into the conflict when she does start going back in time, and then she falls almost like Alice in a Wonderland down the rabbit hole, trying to figure out what to do and what she is doing with this whole situation of hers being able to go back in time. She's having to learn all of these things. Of course, there is a boy, and we're not totally sure what the boy's intentions are, if he's really a good guy or if he's just pretending. It becomes a really interesting and complicated structure from nowadays to going back in time, and they're trying to keep timelines straight because they're going back in time to meet with people who are then they're going back to the future, but then they have to go back in time again and keep the timelines right because they're meeting people that for them was like a couple of hours, and for the individuals that they're meeting with, it's been 18 years. Things like that. It's really, really interesting. I really think it's fun. It is not as historically accurate or historically researched as Waterfall, the River of Time series, but it is interesting. It's fun. It's very much young adult. It has a lot of slang for today, so that might throw you a little bit in the idea that they're going back in time and she's continuing to use modern day slang, but it's not without its purpose. So don't let it bug you too much if you read that one. It's in terms of spice level and whatnot, it's a 0. The romantic relationship is in a weird place at the end of the book. So it's a very safe and clean novel. You can let your kids read it, your young adults, kiddos, because I think young kids would just not understand what's going on. But it all takes place in London. So all of the places that they're going back and forth to is in different time periods in London, England. And there's a really, really big mystery as to what's going on and who is actually telling the truth. So I think you will like it. If you like mysteries and time travel and putting those together, this is a really fun one. So this is Ruby Red by Kerstin Gier, and there's 3 in that series. So it is a trilogy, and it is like it ends after the trilogy. It's really, really good. So you like that one. And then, of course, we cannot go without talking about the OG, the one that I feel like will always have the number 1 place in my heart as a time travel story, and that is Outlander by Diana Gabaldon. Okay, so there's a lot to be said about Outlander. The TV show, I feel like, is a fairly good representation of the book series. However, there are a lot of translations from the book series or from the books to the TV series that just get lost. There is a lot of brutality in the books that are not in the movie or in the TV show, which I think is good because Diana Gabaldon did a lot of research, especially for this very first book, on what's historically accurate. I think as the books progressed, it became less researched because as a author who has a deadline and has things that they have to do, it's harder for them to research as much. But Diana Gabaldon always did a really good job of keeping things as historically accurate as she possibly could. So this, in the last 2 books that I suggested, in Ruby Red and Waterfall, these are fictitious families, fictitious individuals, fictitious events, but they all are surrounding real things. This book goes all in. Outlander goes all in on the idea that you have been plopped down in time. So we are right in the middle of the Jacobite uprising when she goes back. So let's talk about the story if you don't know it. The story of Outlander follows the main character, Claire, who is a young woman. She's about 24, 25, I believe. No, I'm wrong. She is 27 and is considered kind of like an old maid when she goes back. It's really funny. But so she's 27. She got married right before the beginning of World War II, and her husband was sent off to war, and she joined as a nurse to help and assist. So the vast majority of their marriage was spent separated from each other. And we are picking them up when they are on their honeymoon, even though they've been married for years. And they've gone to Scotland for kind of a nice weekend away. They have a very interesting relationship. They're very sweet with each other, but it's the kind of sweetness that's like, I'm still getting to know you. So the relationship is obviously still very new, but it is a settled newness. They obviously love each other very much, and they care deeply for each other. And you see that throughout the beginning of the book, how much Claire cares for her husband, and it creates a really interesting conflict in the story because of what comes later. So while they're in Scotland, Claire is doing some exploring, and she discovers a circle of stones, which there are stone circles all over the place in Scotland. Well, maybe not all over the place, but there are a lot of them in Scotland. And so this isn't a totally uncommon thing, but it's also not like they're on every street corner either. So she goes and she's kind of exploring, and as she gets up to the stones, she starts to hear kind of a buzzing sound. And when she touches the stone, she falls through time, and she goes back to the 1700s, and she is stuck in the middle of the Jacobite uprising in Scotland, trying to put a new king on the throne. So we are smack dab in real events. These are real things that are happening in Scotland at the time. And the way that Diana Gabaldon went about weaving Claire into this story is absolute perfection, in my opinion. I think the way that Diana Gabaldon wrote the story, the way that she wove Claire into the story, the actual historical events was very interesting. Of course, there is the great love story, which is Jamie Fraser, who is everyone's, like, I feel like the most, he's just the most, okay? Like, we love him. We love Jamie Fraser a lot, and he's like the best, whatnot. But he is a little bit younger than she is, and he ends up becoming her protector. And through a series of events, they end up falling in love with each other. And thus begins like the really, really serious conflict between Claire and her husband in current time, which is like the late 1940s, early 1950s, and her great love for Jamie back in the 1700s. It is a story that is emotionally upheaving, if that's a word. Upheaving, is that even a word? Whatever, I'm using it. The emotional connection that you get to everybody that's in the story is so great. And I loved falling in love with Claire and with Jamie and with the Fraser clan and with Scotland. And, you know, it made me feel very emotionally connected to, I'm sorry, I'm getting so many text messages. What is going on? Could we like be quiet for just a half a second? Shh, quiet. We're going to be quiet for a minute. So Claire and Jamie's relationship is one that has definitely held up through the years after this book was published. It is a great sweeping love story over an epic scale, epic historical events that are really going on. The series itself is pretty long. I think there's well over 8 books, I want to say, and they're thick. My girl Diana does not write small, like, this one's floppy. I like how floppy this one is. This one makes me happy. I have a hardback cover version of it as well. But the floppy one's fun. But the series itself, there's a lot of books, and then she has branch off books that tells the story of different characters that you meet throughout the series. We go from Scotland to France to America, and they are in America. I think at the end of the series, I know that's where they are ending it in the TV series. So there's a lot that's going on in the series, and it's really, really good. And I feel like Diana Gabaldon's storytelling is incredible. It makes you feel like you're there. It is very sweeping, but it is slow. There's a lot of people that don't like it because it's slow in this world of, I want the information now, and I want the spicy spice now, and I don't want to have any buildup, and I don't want a slow burn, and I don't want, like, this is not the book for you if you like that kind of writing. If you want it right now shoved in your face and you don't have to work for it, this is not going to be the book for you. However, it is so good if you give it the chance. If you let it be slow and just know it's going to be slow and just keep going, it is so enrapturing. Like, it warms you from the inside. Obviously I love this book a lot. It's one I've read multiple times. I did watch the TV series. I did stop watching, I think, after season 5. The events of the end of season 5 were really intense, and I just couldn't. It deals with SA, and I just couldn't. I have not read more than the first book. Just to clarify, I have read the first book multiple times. In terms of spice, Diana Gabaldon writes a lot of spice in her books. She is a spicy girl. She likes the spice. It doesn't in this book, in Outlander, the spice doesn't start until when is it? After the wedding. I just love. Okay, I'm just going to read to you. I'm just going to read to you the back, or the little blurb at the beginning of this one. Okay. It says, people disappear all the time. Ask any policeman. Better yet, ask a journalist. Disappearances are bread and butter to journalists. Young girls run away from home. Young children stray from their parents and are never seen again. Housewives reach the end of their tether and take their grocery money and a taxi to the station. International financiers change their names and vanish into the smoke of imported cigars. Many of the lost will be found eventually, dead or alive. Disappearances, after all, have explanations. Usually. That stage is so good. It's so good. I love it so much. Okay, so go read that book. So those are the 3 books that I really wanted to suggest to you guys today. We have Waterfall, Ruby Red, and Outlander. All 3 of these books I feel like are really wonderful representations of different styles of writing, but also different styles of adopting time travel into a story. The historical events or lack thereof can be really fun. And I really, really enjoy these books. If you have read these books, any one of the 3 of them, please let me know in the comments below so that we can reminisce on their wonders. If you have any recommendations of really good time travel books that you have read that you really enjoyed, please also put that in the comments because I think that would be fun. And if you got to the very end of this video because of spooky season, will you put a bat or a pumpkin in the comments? Because I like to see the bats and the pumpkins. They're really cute. I'm so excited for Halloween. You have no idea. Also, if you haven't liked and subscribed to my YouTube channel, please do for more cool reviews and book chat with me. And as always, remember that you are worthy, you are loved, and happy reading.